Good evening, everyone. Severe Weather Team 9 meteorologist Nathan Shutt joining you for this edition of Nate at 8. And of course, the bigger story this evening, rain returning across the area, but thankfully no threat for severe weather and not anticipating a flooding concern either. That is the first thing we're going to be talking about are the cool temperatures and rain that we're dealing with here for the overnight hours. Now, by tomorrow morning, we're going to dry back up and we finally spot a dry day for tomorrow. And that's what we're going to be touching on with this edition of Nate at 8. Dry and even warmer for your Wednesday. Those temperatures can trend at least about 10 degrees warmer from this afternoon, tomorrow afternoon. Now, while we are likely dry tomorrow, showers will likely return Thursday. So we will be watching for one more round of some rain moving back into the area before dry conditions then finally just take hold as we go through the weekend. But in general, from this point on, once we see this rain taper off here later on tonight, this is a much drier period of weather that we have in place over the next even week. And a lot of these days over the next week will end up dry. So it is certainly, if you've been hoping for some dry weather, especially to cut the grass, it's been hard as of recent, and the grass is it's like mine getting awfully high. It's been hard to try to find a time to mow with this wet weather, but thankfully we get a nice dry stretch. We can get out and catch up on some yard work, enjoy the outdoors, as this is going to be a nice stretch of weather ahead as we do extend over even the next week. Again, a lot of the next week is going to be a pleasant stretch of weather. Joe, good rainy evening to you as well. That's certainly true. Good rainy evening. That steady rain in place across the area. These temperatures into the 50s. And our current temperatures right now, mid-lower 50s. Now, we're not going to cool a whole lot more as we go through the night. Really, how it feels now is how it's going to feel by tomorrow morning. These temperatures can still drop mainly by just a few degrees. It could take us closer to 50. But again, these are fairly stable. We are not going to cool much as we do extend into tomorrow morning. There's that rain still continuing across the area at that 8 o'clock mark, and we've seen there's a lot of this rain now positioning itself closer to and south of Route 22, and of course you can see that steady rain continuing south of I-70 as well. And while we're seeing that steady rain start to taper off north of Route 22 in Tuscarawas, Carroll, Columbiana County especially, there's still some lingering showers to be had. So even though we're seeing that steady rain come to an end, not necessarily completely drying up quite yet. That's going to be arriving later tonight, but this steadier rain is starting to taper off for locations north of Route 22 at this hour. And as we get closer to midnight, then even these lingering showers will likely taper off as well. So still a little bit longer time before we completely dry up for tonight. But for those locations, starting to see at least that steady rain start to taper off. Asa joining us this evening on YouTube. Good evening to you. Hope that you stay dry and warm. Certainly trying the best, Austin. Hard too, but certainly trying to stay dry this evening. That's for sure. This weather is perfect for snuggling into bed and watching the upcoming weather for the week. Very true, Austin. A good weather to fall asleep to, isn't it? As well. Maybe open up the window. You can hear that rain falling, and yeah, that certainly makes for some good weather to fall asleep to. There's no doubt about that. That is true, and we don't have any thunder to wake us up with this. And again, no severe weather, no flooding potential, nothing impactful, just that steady rain that we had in place going throughout this evening. And so certainly nice to see as well a break from any impactful weather going throughout this evening. So our future cast, it's doing its best here to illustrate that precipitation in place. As this isn't perfect, but it's giving us the idea here, this model run with our future cast, that we'll notice this rain continuing early tonight, but it will begin to taper off, especially once we get past midnight. So leading up to 2 o'clock in the morning, this rain will likely then finally taper off across the area. So, even while the steadier rain starting to come to an end here into the latter part of this evening, we still can have some lingering showers. And once we start to see those taper off, it's likely closer to, if not shortly after midnight. And then we dry back up going into tomorrow morning. And we start off with some cloud cover in the morning hours, likely giving way to a little more sunshine Wednesday afternoon. Of course, the big story tomorrow, we finally get the day without a threat for precipitation. So it's looking nice as we go throughout Wednesday. We're not to worry about any showers returning. There's no chance of precipitation for Wednesday. We're looking dry. And again, we don't spot sunny skies, but at least get some sunshine returning and warmer temperatures as well, over 10 degrees warmer. That's a noticeable warm up from today going into tomorrow, with those highs topping off just in the 70s. And a good day to, if you haven't had that chance to maybe catch up on some yard work. But even if you can't get to it tomorrow, don't worry. We're going to track more dry conditions returning. Once we get past Thursday, it's going to be, again, a fairly quiet stretch of weather that we have going into next week. And yes, like I mentioned, once we get past Thursday, because we are still going to be tracking some showers returning Thursday. Now, what we do see is likely more hit or miss variety, not the steady rain that we had this evening. We're getting back to more scattered activity, and we'll watch for this late afternoon and evening primarily on Thursday. It carries over to Thursday night, but by daybreak Friday, it moves to east of our area, and then we'll get further clearing. And this is when a lot of sunshine will likely break out Friday, continuing as we go through the weekend. So we spot some sunshine tomorrow, then likely abundant sunshine by the time we get into Friday and the weekend. At that point, temperatures are cooling a little bit from the 70s on Wednesday, back in the 60s Thursday into Friday. Then we'll climb right back in the 70s for this weekend. Lola, good evening. Nice, cool evening. Glad the rain is moving on. Ready for some sunshine. We're going to be, Lola, definitely excited to see some sunshine return for tomorrow. And again, while I don't think we get complete clearing in our skies, at least we get some sunshine to return, and even more by the weekend. So looking forward to that as well, as we're going to spot even more of that sunshine breaking out at that point. So what we have coming our way on Thursday, we have some showers, maybe a thunderstorm in the mix, but thankfully not anticipating anything impactful Thursday either. The severe weather risk looks centered way to our south on Thursday, and the flooding concerns look very low as well. So not anticipating anything severe with these thunderstorms. If we do happen to see one develop later into the day Thursday, what's the percentage of a thunderstorm happening on Thursday? I would give it decent odds. I wouldn't say it's likely, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least a rumble of thunder, some of those heavier showers. Again, Austin, not going to be tracking anything that's going to be severe later today Thursday, so nothing impactful, but maybe a rumble of thunder, some heavier showers. I think mostly it's just showers that we're dealing with. I don't think we're dealing with a lot of thunderstorms if we do happen to see one later into the day Thursday. And again, even if we were to see a thunderstorm develop, not anticipating it to become severe. So we're not anticipating any impacts later into the day Thursday, and the flooding concerns look very low as well. So good news that it's likely more of just a nuisance to deal with some additional showers late Thursday than anything that's going to be impactful. And again, those carry over Thursday night, and then we dry right back up. That precipitation threat is non-existent Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and likely even into Monday as well. By Tuesday of next week is when rain chance will pick back up. We can get into a couple wet days next week going into next Tuesday, Wednesday. And, there still could be some fine tuning on the timing of that precipitation next week. But in general, going into the middle of next week, we'll be watching for at least a couple likely wet days. And then we could start to dry back up into the following weekend. And that's when temperatures can pick back up on their warming trends. So you'll notice that we're picking up on a warming trend as we go through the weekend, thanks to quite a bit of sunshine returning. So while it's still dealing with a mix of sun and clouds Wednesday, getting back to more cloud cover Thursday with those showers. By the time we get into Friday, that's when we're dealing with more sun than clouds likely. That carries over through the weekend. And by the time we even get into Monday, still likely a good amount of sunshine to be had. And then we notice that a little bit of I would say, hiccup in the warming trend overall, as we look at our temperature trend over the next week, that a little bit of a cool down Thursday, Friday after the warm up on Wednesday, but the warming trend takes hold this weekend. You'll notice that we're climbing further in the 70s and 80s on Monday. Then once we start to see that cloud cover and rain, we trend a little cooler next Tuesday, Wednesday. But even then, I still think we can see our temperatures climbing well in the 70s. And that's still, even our cooler days next week look to be warmer than our cooler days this week. So still anticipating overall a warmer week ahead next week. And this is likely just the beginning of a warm pattern in place. Likely not too many cool days looking ahead as we go through the middle of the month. At this point, I really think that potential to deal with, especially with a freeze, but even some frost, is looking low with that warm pattern in place. Looking ahead, going into next week and through next week. But even if we, going through next week, if we were to even talk about what we have coming our way going into the middle of the month, I think that overall it could be a warm pattern as well. So, if you want to get out this weekend, and Saturday or into Sunday on Mother's Day. And if you want to plant some of that sensitive vegetation, maybe plant some flowers, I think the risk of dealing with anything that's going to be like anything of a killing frost or freeze is looking low at this point with this warm pattern. Usually you want to wait till the going into the middle of May to start to plant, but it does look like this pattern is warm. If it was a cold pattern going into the middle of the month, certainly would still caution it, but this pattern looks to be warm into the middle of the month. I think at this point that we're dealing with a low risk of low chance, if you will, of dealing with those temperatures dipping back mid to lower 30s at this point going into the middle of May. So your 9+1 day forecast, again, dealing with some sunshine, returning with dry conditions for your Wednesday. By Thursday is when we'll see more of that scattered variety, some showers returning into the afternoon and evening. Those temperatures trending a little cooler Thursday, Friday with respect to those highs back in the 70s on Wednesday. Then for the weekend, temperatures pick right back up, and this is some great weather. This is a far cry from what we had last weekend for this weekend. It is just total difference, night and day, if you will, for lack of better words. That it's just such a difference. I mean, you're dealing with a lot more sunshine, dry conditions, and of course, this past weekend we all knew we had a lot of cloud cover. We dealt with that rain occasionally as well. So certainly a big difference from last weekend. This weekend, highs back well in the 70s by Sunday. On Mother's Day, by Monday, then we're likely into the 80s. A little bit cooler than with that cloud cover and rain going into the middle of next week. Then we should start to see drier conditions return late next week. As soon as we start to see some drier conditions and more sunshine, that warming trend will resume, and we can climb even further into the 80s late next week. And those unseasonably warm temperatures then can carry over even going into that following weekend. We can see some of those unseasonably warm temperatures. And at that point, as we go into following weekend, then we're talking about, obviously going through the middle of the month, and this is a warm pattern in place, and usually want to wait to plant around the middle of May. But with this warm pattern in place going through the middle of May, I would say, the closest we're going to get to the mid lower 30s is likely by the time we get into Saturday morning. And that's when temperatures will drop around 40, maybe sneaking into the 30s, especially some of those, some of you tuned in that are, live, nestled into a valley where you typically trend colder than what's forecasted, where that cold air just sinks to. Maybe you can wake up into the 30s in some of those locations. That's likely our coldest morning. And then after that, it's just an unseasonably warm stretch for the most part from the weekend going through next week. That'll then take us as we look ahead going into the middle of the month going into the following weekend. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Nate at 8. Of course, you can catch the latest coming up on News 9 at 10 on Fox 9. News 9 tonight at 11. Of course, stay tuned not only for the latest on what we're going to be tracking with this rain coming to an end and the latest on those showers returning for Thursday, but also, of course, election coverage as well in Ohio. Make sure to stay tuned for the latest on that coming up at 10 and 11 o'clock tonight. News 9 at 10 again on Fox 9, and then News 9 tonight at 11. And, of course, you can always stay tuned for that next edition of Nate at 8. Join me right back here tomorrow evening around 8 o'clock for that next edition of Nate at 8, as at that point we're going to be all talking about how nice it was to enjoy a dry day across the Ohio Valley. And of course, we'll continue to bring you the latest, and we'll look at the latest timing of those showers returning on Thursday and that beautiful stretch of weather for the weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in as always. I hope you had a wonderful day. I hope you have a great night, and I'll see you on the next edition of Nate at 8.